going crazy with each other, to now they're like gazing at each other's eyes and having this real deep connection with each other. You're essentially taking your characters on a journey, and without even telling your readers that they're in love, without them even having to tell each other, I love you, I'm in love with you, I'm falling in love with you. No, your readers already know this because they've seen your characters fall in love through these acts of intimate sex. And sex is such a special moment for people. It can really connect people together, and I think as romance authors, it's a tool that we should be utilizing. Like, use it to tell your stories, allow your readers to see that your characters are falling in love with each other through having sex. Definitely use it.
Good points all around. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? How are you keeping it fresh, Caroline?
Well, something that I've always thought is that sex shows connection, right? And there's another language that happens above the dialogue that you're putting into your book to show that connection between two people. The actions can as well. So when you have that first encounter, it can all be all about learning each other, and then as you have further encounters, they can be more and more in tune with each other as they go, till at the very end they know exactly what to do, exactly what to say. Or it can be that at the end they go, wow, I hope it's always like this, kind of thing. So it really can show that connection building, because you can build the familiarity into the sex scenes as they continue on in the book, for sure.
I see a lot of nods of agreement. Cynthia. Oh, you're still on mute, Cynthia.
Oh, let's undo that. Am I there now?
Yeah.
Am I back? Okay. My sex scenes tend to each have a reason for being there. This is kind of hard to explain, but there's a reason why they're doing this at this time. Something's happened, something they want to express. So they're almost all different simply because they have different emotions behind them. There's a reason why this is happening. And I know that's a little bit vague, but they're not just there because, oh, it's time to do a sex scene. They're doing something for a reason. It's sometimes there's been a trauma, sometimes they're just happy, whatever it is, but there's a reason for that scene.
Yeah. Oh, Avery, you're on mute.
Literally moved my mouse over to the mute button, so I was like, I'm gonna unmute it, and then I didn't. I think, like, as far as keeping it fresh goes, it's important to really lean into the characters. Like, you shouldn't be able to take a sex scene out of one of your books and insert it into like another book and have it make sense or like fit their dynamic. Like, each character should have like their own dynamic and sense of like the power balance and who's more dominant, who's more submissive. I mean, it might fluctuate, but there's always going to be like a certain way that like a certain hero speaks to her or him or whoever. Like, yeah, I think it's just keeping it fresh is really about leaning into who they are, because that is going to dictate how the whole scene runs.
Yeah. Crystal and Felicity, you guys have started co-writing in the more recent projects. Do you guys have anything to add about trying to make that balance together?
I think that for us, the nice thing is that we can give each character kind of a different voice, because we can take that scene and say, okay, Felicity, you're going to handle the main lead, and I'll handle the love interest, and we can go from there. And so that's kind of a great dynamic that we're able to have, and making sure that their voices sound their own in those moments, and that we're not just focusing sometimes on one person, of course, unless a lot of times we do first person point of view, but a lot of times, even in the way that they respond, the dialogue we use, it can sound completely their own. So that's kind of the fun thing with co-writing a sex scene.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, I think that was some really good answers on the first topic. Oh my gosh, we're off to a great start. All right, well, I think that was about everybody. And I can roll into number 2. We have, do you think that writers have a duty to show responsible sex in their stories by mentioning protection and gaining clear consent, such as the use of cable ties being a legitimate danger, yet the 50 Shades reference is widely replicated? Avery, do you want to start us on this one?
Can she hear?
Avery, are you there?
Uh-oh, she's kind of frozen on mine.
We'll give her a second. Does anyone else want to hop in on that one? A duty for the responsible sex. Do you want to show that in your works?
I can say something about the consent part. We put that in every single book that we write. Every single time. Not every single time necessarily, that maybe not like every subsequent time, but every first time, even like a kiss, it's always, can I really want to, do you want to do this too? I mean, we literally ask, we have the character ask, you know, I want this, do you want it to, in some form or fashion, whatever fits their character. In fact, that's like one of our catchphrases. We even made stickers. Consent is sexy. Like, it's really, really important to us, because it's important to us in real life too. So it's super important for our characters to make sure that they're asking consent. So, yeah, super important for us.
Crystal, is she telling the truth?
Yeah, she's telling the truth. The thing that's a little bit different with us when it comes to the protection is we write paranormal romance. And in our romance, a lot of times there cannot be conception, or there is an issue where they're paranormal beings. So things that we deal with that we have to think about as humans, when we bring in that element, they don't have to think about it. So it plays a little different in writing paranormal. I'd say that would go with something that's sci-fi and fantasy as well, and not necessarily needing to touch on that. But although we're not talking about like the use of, contraceptive or, condoms, we are bringing up the fact that there's no way that we're having babies right now, or that they're different beings. So it's our roundabout way of doing it, which would definitely be different in a traditional romance, a contemporary romance. Those are things that you might want to bring up, because I don't know about everybody else, but on Wattpad, when you don't bring it up, the readers will bring it up for sure.
They do. And that, in fact, in the book we just completed, Beautiful Chaos, and one of the last scenes, actually, it's one of the last scenes, and it's a scene where they finally have sex. Someone commented, protection. And I said, wait, hold on, read a little further. And they address it. He says, he pulls it out, and she's like, wait, you don't have to do that. We can't, we're not compatible in that way. And in any way at all, there's no way that anything like that could happen.
Other than physically.
Yeah, physically, of course. But no, nothing, no impregnation, nothing can be spread between us. And he's like, oh, well, in that case. And so we address it, but in that way. And if we don't write contemporary together, in fact, she barely writes contemporary at all. But when I do write contemporary, and I do address it, because I think it's important.
Nice. Anyone else want to jump in on the responsibly writing safe sex?
I'm back now, so I don't know what happened. Sorry, my internet just like booted me off, and I was like panicked.
Well, I'm glad you came back to us.
I think, like, especially because we're talking through a Wattpad lens, I would definitely say that it's important because the readers are very keen on it. Like they said, like they will pick up on it if you don't. And I think also just from like actual Wattpad, even like judging standards, I think it's something that Wattpad would probably prefer to see. Like, I think there's kind of a standard that they hold their stories to, and they want to be modeling like a positive example sort of within the community, knowing that the readership is fairly young. And I don't know if you cut out when you read the question, but you were talking about like cable ties as a danger, and like this is some shades, like that stuff is my pet peeve. Like, I'm not claiming I'm like an expert in BDSM, but like I do my research when I include those elements in my scenes, and I do try to make sure that the things that I do are safe. Like I see a lot of unsafe choking, like on and off Wattpad, just certain things like that. So I think that like there is the chance that people will get the wrong idea from your books, and unless you're like really straight into dark romance where there's like that heavy suspension of belief and reality, that I think you do have a duty to be responsible with what you're portraying.
Definitely agree. I think those are some more good points. Does anyone have more that they want to add to this one? This one's a good question.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like, I obviously agree with everything that everyone's saying, but I think it's just worth mentioning that, when it comes to writing these consent, like, I don't know, like dialogue, or it could literally just be like a sentence or two It doesn't have to be this whole elaborate paragraph where you have to like dive into the fact that they're really getting consent and then this and that. I mean, obviously, if it is a paragraph, it's a paragraph and that's fine, but it could literally be a sentence or two just to let your readers know that both parties involved are consenting, and then your readers can just enjoy the rest of the scene knowing that it's a respectful, safe place that two people are consenting. Definitely. Do we have more to add on that? We have so many people here who have a lot of good knowledge. Come on, share it. Share it with the Wattpad.
One of the ways that I do consent in my stories is it doesn't always have to be, especially if the couple, if you're writing the second or third or fourth sex scene with the couple, I do make sure there's consent in every one. It's something that's very important, as we've already said, consent is sexy. It can be a physical action too. It can be, he holds up the condom between his fingers and she nods. And that's consent right there. And or she can say, I'm on the pill. Did you know that? Or in some ways, and he just dives into her because he's excited about the fact that he doesn't have to put on the condom at that point. And it can move itself around in many ways like that. So it can be about the physical, the description. It can be nonverbal in some cases, as long as there's something there that says, yes, I'm okay with what you're about to do. From either, and it's, if you do a dual point of view like I do, usually the sex scene starts in one point of view, maybe ends in the other. And if I do that, there's usually a point where I'll break and then I'll go to the other point of view. And at that point, I will add in sort of a mini consent from the other side, where she'll say something like, yes, I want to do this, or, oh, let's get this over with, or what are you waiting for, or something like that, to allow that consent to come from both points of view, which is something I've tried, and it seems to have worked so far. So.
Very good. Let's see, that's almost everybody. Anything to add, Cynthia?
I'll say just one thing. A little bit. I just try to keep in mind the audience that I'm dealing with. This is Wattpad. We have some really young readers. So I try to think about things. I don't want to inadvertently teach them something that I wouldn't really want them to do, or that so I'm always kind of thinking about that. Is this scene going to give them the wrong idea or have them want to experiment with things maybe they're not ready for? So it's a little bit about who my audience is. I have to remember that on Wattpad a little bit more than I do otherwise.
Yes, that really circles back to do you think as writers, it's your duty to do that? That's very thoughtful in that direction. I think that's awesome.
I wanted to say too, just because the DubeCon stuff, especially with the dark romance, is it's everywhere. If you're on Book Talk, you're hearing about this all the time. And I think that there's certain words that we have to acknowledge that when they are said by a character, when we hear no and stop, I think it's our responsibility to make sure characters stop. And you see a lot in these where it's the words are coming out of the mouth and a character is not stopping. And that becomes really scary to me, that we're saying that's okay, even though we're in the mind of the character and they're like, I really enjoy this. The words came out and that this person didn't stop. And I know we're trying to paint them as, the morally gray or the dark character, but that to me personally is a little too dark and not something very attractive, because as a reader, I'm thinking this person has there's no hard limit there. And you think you know what's in my head, but I've said the words. So that's just my personal opinion, especially when it comes to the DubeCon stuff, that no and stop. If you throw that in there, I'm judging your character. I'm definitely judging your character.
It is really scary too, because of like we said already, the age of the people on Wattpad. I mean, you have to be 13 to be on Wattpad. To me, that's young. And people are lying about their age. Let's just be honest. So when you have someone that young reading these stories, they don't know. When I was under 13, I wouldn't have known to tell the line between what's actually acceptable and what's not. And so to me, no and stop should really be, in my opinion, really be off limits when no and stop is said. And I've said before, I'm really easy on books. Like, I generally enjoy most things I read. And if there's a couple of books that I vehemently despise. And one of them is because characters use no and stop, and they were continually taken advantage of, and that was just okay, and it's not okay. So I do consent is just huge for that.
Okay. So we know there are readers out there who do like to read dubcon or non-con.
Absolutely. And
so,
I also I too.
So would you say as long as they're
done correctly,
the responsibility there on the writer is to firmly put that warning out there in the world before, like at the front of the book, then
that could get us into the trigger warning conversation, which could go on for hours. So I just feel like as long as it's done responsibly, of course, because I too love dubcon. I do. I love to read it. But I just feel like we do have a responsibility as writers, especially on a platform like Wattpad, where it's out there for free for virtually anyone of any age to get to it. That's the thing.
Maybe you don't market it to YA readers or that sort of thing.
Right. That's to me with Wattpad where the difference lies.
Fair enough. Wow, we've got a lot of points on this one, but I don't want to run out of time because we do have a lot of really good questions. So I'm going to move on to number 3 if everybody is ready, unless we have anyone foaming at the mouth for one more question or one more in there. Okay, I'm gonna move on because the next one's pretty good too. How important is dialogue during sex scenes? How much do you include, and how do you avoid cringy sonnets of affection? Felicity, you want to start us off?
Yes. Okay, I love dialogue in sex scenes. Actually, there is a thing that's too much though. As far as the avoiding being cringy part, I don't know any other way to say it besides just don't be cringy. Like, don't say cringy things. Like if you write it and then honestly, like if you write it and then read it out loud and you're like, oh God, like someone said that's me, ew. Like, no, you might want to rethink that. Don't go on and on and on. But honestly, like one of the things that I like the most in a sex scene lately, especially just some of the things I've been reading, is the praise, the whole like that,
good girl.
I hate to be like, yeah, thank you. The good girl thing, that feels good. Yes, that's good. Like you feel good, that whole thing. Things like that. I think dialogue is important because sometimes it's not like the action so much. Actually, most of the time for me, it's not the action of the sex that I want to read. It's the words and like the feelings that I like better than anything else. And so it's not that I want the sex scene to be full of words, because I don't want it full of dialogue, but those words that are thrown in there, like sprinkled in there, to me, I really, really enjoy. So if you read it out loud and you cringe, take it out. And the other thing, well, never mind. I'm gonna save that for another question because I think we have another question coming up about what I was going to say. But just don't overdo it. But I do think it's important. If I read a sex scene with no dialogue in it whatsoever, I'm gonna be a little put off by that. So I do think it's important.
I'll read it. I'll read literally any sex scene. Anyone have anything to add?
I'll read it, but
any more to add to the dialogue conversation?
Yeah, I mean everyone loves a little bit of dirty talk, right? We like to just feel like we're getting transported into the scene. I think it can really just humanize your characters as well, because people talk during sex in real life. So put it into your books if that feels right to your characters. And as well, it's a really great opportunity to just add a bit of humor to your book, because things go wrong in a funny way sometimes, and then you just have a laugh about it, and then your characters maybe connect over that a bit more, and then you just feel a little bit more like, oh yeah, this is like real people, they're really falling in love, and I get to witness this. And it's just a really nice thing to have in your book sometimes. So yeah, don't feel scared to kind of add a bit of humor in there. Like I had a character once that was carrying his woman up the stairs, and he fell over and dropped her, and then they just had a bit of a giggle, and then they had sex on the stairs. So every opportunity, right?
Yeah, there you go. All right.
I've got something. So in one of the books that I wrote recently, was the second season of Royal Deception, there's a sex scene on a train where they're in the future king's train car, and she has to run out of the shower. They're soaking wet, and she has to run out of the shower and grab condom, and then she slips and falls and does like this complete pratfall. And there was a bunch of dialogue around that, and it sort of kind of slowed down the sex scene a little bit and brought in some humor. And he jokes with her and calls her Princess Pratfall and all this fun stuff. So adding that bit of like funny humor dialogue in the middle of a fairly heavy, steamy sex scene can sometimes lighten it up, especially if you're writing a book that has a lot of humor in it. Because in some books I've seen where we've got this wonderful light rom-com banty dialogue, and then they have the sex scene and it's super steamy and super serious, and there's like really intense sex, and then we go back to light humor dialogue. So it's important to match the dialogue in your sex scenes with the tone of the book. And so, for example, if you have a grumpy sunshine and the grumpy person is in the sex scene, they're not going to be like the sunshiny verbose laughing and stuff. They're going to be the, I like this do this now, they're going to be very on point and minimizing their words. Whereas the sunshine person might be a lot more expressive. And so matching that, as we said, matching it to your character, but also matching it to the tone of the book is incredibly important. Now, I do have like sort of a follow-up mini question. How do you write sounds? Because we all know we moan and we groan, and there's all those wonderful sounds we make during sex. Do you write them? Do you describe them? What is the best way to handle that? There was just something that popped in my head.
Write them, you cowards. A moist squelch happened. Just write it.
Disgusting. No, squelching. That's a bad.
I tend to I describe them more than anything else. I don't usually actually write them. I do describe them, that it was like this or like that, or, it's hard for me to actually do the sound, but it really does depend on what kind of book you're doing. It depends on what you're up to. If it's a really serious one, or, as she said, the tone of the book kind of sets that, but I do tend to describe.
Yes. This flows a little bit into question 4. Does anybody else have anything to add about the dialogue, or can we start incorporating the next one too?
I was just going to say that.
Okay, I'm going to bring it up because like we can still go back and forth a little bit, but this one is a little bit in the direction we were going. How sexy does the sex scene have to be? Is there any room for humor or mistakes in the bedroom? And I think you guys were already incorporating that a little bit, so I want to hear more about that. Cynthia, I just had you up here. You wanna take the lead?
Yeah, they were definitely, I was thinking about that. It segues into this a lot. The first thing I think of when I hear this question is there's a scene in Outlander, and I don't know if it's in the books or just on the TV show. I'm talking about the TV series, where you've been waiting for months for Jamie and Claire to get back together. She's been home, she's raised a child, all these other things, and they finally do this. And you're waiting for that big sex scene. They've had dinner, they've undressed each other, they've done all these things. And when they get ready to actually fall into bed, they just sort of really literally fall into bed and bump heads. And instead of having this steamy, perfect reunion, they just start laughing and it's hilarious. And I remember laughing out loud myself when I saw it. And I thought, what a genius thing to do, even though we know that everybody's been waiting for this forever, to make it funny instead of serious. I thought that was just genius. And I think what that can do sometimes when you have these moments, when a sex scene is interrupted by something crazy, somebody falls off the bed, somebody hits their head on the headboard, somebody does something really bizarre, it helps the characters bond. Somebody talked about this. It makes them more real to you. It makes them more real to each other. And it's a bonding moment because they can talk about that, or it's a memory they're going to remember. They're probably going to bring it up again and again during their time together in your book as well. So I don't think it always has to be this totally serious, steamy thing that's going on and nothing ever goes wrong and everybody does everything the right way and all. Humor is really good. And I think that the reader will appreciate that. I know that I do.
Nice. Any more for humor, serious? Where do you guys draw the line?
I think of The Fault in Our Stars, and this is a little bit different than that. And we're talking about the first time. And what I really loved, even though it's a YA book, what I really loved about that moment is that it wasn't perfect. And isn't that life? I mean, how many people have had a perfect first time. And so for me, that is a love scene that like really stands out to me. I remember it all the time because of its imperfections, and that there wasn't, even though it was a very intimate moment between the two of them, just those imperfections in there made for something for me as a reader that I'll never forget, because it spoke to me, because that's pretty typical, right? And we see all these ones where it was like, it's amazing, and she has the big O, and we all know that normally doesn't happen the first time. I mean, unless you got yourself a really experienced lover. But as a teenagers, especially as we're learning about our bodies and those type of things, that's not realistic. So I think those little moments of realism in sex scenes make them stand out. And it wasn't so much the sexy stuff. It was the real stuff. Like, you'll never forget that, you know, Jamie and Claire bumped heads, because it was such a great moment between them, and such a human moment, and the way things are, where we're talking about noises and stuff, and squelchy noises and all the other noises. That's real. Like, those are real. They happen. But are they so much fun to like listen to, like read about? Probably not. But, you know, a little awkward first time. Sure. Absolutely.
Anyone else have anything to add? This one's a fun question.
I think like what Caroline said, just about like needing to fit the book too. Like, if you're writing something really dark, like it probably won't be as serious, but I feel like there's kind of a trend lately to make everything as steamy as possible, but it doesn't always fit for me. So it doesn't vibe. Like, you'll have, like the very lighthearted characters, and then it's like, boom, and they're in the bedroom and everything is just like super raunchy, super like maxed out dirty. And you're like, where did these characters go? Because that's like not really true to them anymore. So I think just like fitting the tone and the characters is so important for it to seem like authentic, and even not just humor, but just like those moments of like vulnerability where like maybe the hero, who's like a bit of a player, even kind of admits that he is nervous this time because this is like a really meaningful moment with her, which is like a big step for him. So it's not even just the humor, just those bits of like humanness beyond the like super high steam and movie style sex, I think.
Good points. Good points about matching the characters. Yeah, and we're hearing a lot of that. Anybody else want to chime in on this? Or have we all come to the consensus about, it doesn't have to be all serious? Pretty much. Got a lot of nodding co. Okay. Well, we do have some more to cover, so I'm happy to do that. And then if we have time at the end, we can maybe get an audience question or two in. So let's keep rolling. Let's talk about diversity in the bedroom, including body diversity, sexual orientation, mature characters. If a writer doesn't have a lived experience with a diverse character they're portraying, do they have a responsibility to consult a sensitivity reader for this? I know, Cynthia, you had some experience where you did your research.
I did. I didn't get a sensitivity reader, but I tend to go to Own Voices sites. I'll go to forums where people are discussing things. I had a character who had a condition that was going to limit her mobility a great deal as time moved on, and she had a young lover and she was worried about this. And I wanted to know, how do people accommodate these things? And I found out some things I wasn't aware of. There are all kinds of contraptions. There are special chairs, special contraptions of all kinds. And also, I found out that a lot of, on some of the forums, it was kind of funny because the couples were discussing how they'd accommodated certain things. And they said that they would bring it up to their friends, and their friends would say, wait a minute, I want to try that. They just wanted to do it because it sounded like fun. They didn't care about the accommodations. They just thought, they have these things for people. I found some amazing little gizmos and all that kind of stuff that people can use. And I had the same reaction, sort of like, I think I'm going to buy myself one of those. It's amazing stuff. But Own Voices, blogs, forums, things like that got me through most of the novel. And then later I had some people take a look at it, not necessarily sensitivity readers, but people who had experienced the same thing. So that's where I started. And that's to do with differently abled people and people who have physical limitations that you have to consider. And you're trying to make it realistic. You're trying to make it feel real. And I wanted to get it from people who have been through it. So that was my way of handling that.
Right. I bet writing that your readers were able to learn a few things, maybe even things that they then wanted to try or that would help them. So that's very cool to have that, that in there. So Does anyone else have anything to add to this, or any experiences trying to come up and make sure you were doing justice to a character?
Yeah, I just think really as like authors, we have a responsibility to know what it is we're writing about. So if you know if you've got a character that has a certain situation, just do enough research that you know enough to write about it in a realistic yet respectful manner. I think as long as you're doing that, just make sure you know your stuff.
Exactly. I think Caroline, you were raising your hand too.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
So many people here.
I have children. When I was writing Western Connection, my main female lead is dealing with trauma from an abusive relationship, and it's something that is a lived experience for me. But even though I had that lived experience, and I did go through the healing process, both mentally and, opening myself up to partners in the future after the abuse, I still went and spoke with counselors. I spoke with several people, and with their permission, shared their story with me about how they healed or what it was like for them, basically having sex again after being in an abusive relationship, and how to handle that in writing. It took me a while to figure out how I was going to do it. Even though I have my own story and I can write from my own experience, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just using my lens, because that is one aspect and it may not be well-rounded. So I wanted to make sure that I got some other perspectives too before I blended it all together into how she handled the situation in the book with her love interest. And so I think that's something when we're talking about diversity, making sure we are inclusive in our portrayals, is that even if we have a lived experience, to take the time to do some research on other lived experiences to compare to our own, to flesh it out, so to speak.
Definitely. Cynthia.
What I tried not to do was make it sad and make it feel like these limitations were this awful thing that they had to overcome. It was fun. It finally, because of some of the things that I discovered, there was a lot of fun, a lot of joy in them discovering these things together and doing these things together. And I wanted it to be that way. I didn't want readers to go, oh, you poor thing, you can't move your legs right now, or this has happened. It was more, what can we do? And it sounded just as delicious this way as it would have if this wasn't happening. And I really wanted to make it joyful and exciting and just as steamy and sexy as any other love scenes, any other sex scenes. And it was fun to do that. Instead of looking at it as something that's wrong, it was an opportunity for the two of them to do things that they would never have thought of doing before because they had to do something different. And that was really big for me too. It had to feel good. It had to feel like fun, something that you'd want to do. You'd want to be treated this way too in the bedroom. And I really enjoyed doing that.
Nice. My gosh, we've got so many good points on this one. Let me see. Does anyone have any more, or are we ready for the next question to be tackled? I really like that we had people with experience writing this here today. So, okay, I don't see any hands going up. So I'm going to go on to the next question. Let's see. There have been cases where sex scenes in novels seem to defy the boundaries of human physicality. How do you make sure that the choreography of your sex scenes are realistic? Crystal, I'm going to pick on you now.
Okay. I think one thing that you can definitely do is it doesn't have to be necessarily with a partner, but to try it. I think of a lot of times when you have two couples on their side and they're joining together like that with a back to a front. And then he pulled her head over to kiss her, but you never brought up that his head had to be up, or like he would have broke her neck if he was laying down on the pillow next to her. Like your head can't go back that far. Or if you have them hanging from, the ceiling, one's upside down, the other one's the right way up. I mean, how? I think that when we're trying to do something that's really kind of unique, that we have to look at how does the body move in those ways? And is that really possible? Because somebody's going to call it out. And if it is possible, but it sounds a little extreme, you got to take the time to use your descriptions and say how this really worked, because there's so many times where you're reading something that wasn't described well and you're like, oh, that's I don't get it. So but on the other hand of that, I think sometimes we turn to those extreme things and trying to make the body contort in odd ways to have a unique love scene. And what we're missing out on here is that uniqueness a lot of times comes from the senses, and we start leaving out all 5 senses because they are all engaged in that moment. So rather than having them hanging from the ceiling, it might be better just to maybe, if you want, have one hanging from the ceiling and talk about all of those things that are engaged, because taste is there, sight's there, smell is there, and really bringing those things in to make it unique instead of going off in some crazy place that's physically impossible for the human body.
That's true. But I have a question. How frequently do you utilize the ceiling?
I mean, I don't know.
I just felt like it was... I'm just checking. You brought it up.
I'll say I don't ever have to call her out for this. She calls me out. I would say at least twice per book. She'll be like, hold on. How did he kiss her like that? That doesn't make any sense. Stop. And okay, fine. We'll rewrite it. So it's not her that's hanging from the ceiling. It's usually me. So.
Nice. Immaculate. Who else has advice for keeping it physically plausible?
Oh, so when I'm thinking out a sex scene, when I'm thinking out location, first of all, right? Because it's not always in a bed. Let's have some fun. Sometimes it's, in a bathtub. Sometimes it's in a canoe or on a barber's chair, various other places. And you got to think about, okay, they're here. How does this work? And there have been times when my husband has been like, what are you doing? And I'm in the bathtub with one foot on the wall going, how does this work? How can I get my hand over it? And I'm thinking about the sex scene going, well, if she's here and that's going to hurt, So when you're thinking about where you're putting this sex scene, I think that's almost just as important as how they're doing the thing, because you need to make sure that, for example, you're in a hayloft. They're not going to get naked because that'll be itchy. So there needs to be a blanket. You're not going to put her back against the wall if she's not wearing a shirt because that'll be itchy. So research your setting, and that will dictate where you put your people. And that will give you sort of your limits on what you can do with regards to arms and sockets and things like that. Because, I mean, if you think about it, you handcuff somebody to a pole and then you turn them around, it's going to break their wrists. But people do that. Like, we read that in sex scenes all the time. And it's just that continuity is so important. And using all 5 senses, as mentioned, that'll allow you to flow through the scene better. If you're talking about all of a sudden the way she tasted, the way his hand felt sliding up her leg, that can be the transition to having them go from top to bottom. So you use those senses to move through the scene, and then it's not so acrobatic at that point.
Fair enough. Sometimes you just got to climb in your bathtub. Let's see.
It worked.
Cynthia?
I'm going to say something. I'm going to try to say this delicately, but I have actually Googled some things on occasion. Sometimes when I'm writing from a male point of view, and I don't really know how that feels. I don't really know what that's about. I have literally Googled positions. I've Googled what orgasms feel like for a guy. I've Googled some really interesting things just to see if I could get this right. I'm not going to go too far into anything, but if you looked at my history sometimes on the computer, you'd wonder, what in the world is she doing? But I want to see it. I want to see, I want to look at it. I want to read other people writing about those positions. Again, you go to forums. Some of these forums are very strange, so be careful. I go wherever I have to go to listen to or watch or read about the things that I'm about to write about. And it sounds bizarre, but like I said, be careful. It's not safe for work or at home either sometimes. So be cool. Be careful what you do.
Fair. Avery.
Yeah, like I that's kind of what I was gonna say, is like my search history is like generally a disaster, and it's a mess. I just search everything. If I'm stuck on a scene, I will be like, okay, they're in this position, so like I'll get inspiration from just seeing it. I don't know. But also there's like a good, I I don't know what the link is, but I found a good calculator where you can take two people and describe their height and weight, and it'll show them like on a little line chart for proportionality. And I think that's maybe something to keep in mind too, because I know some people really like to have like this enormous hero and then a very teeny tiny heroine. And then they like through the whole book, they will describe things that are like physically impossible. Like he'll be 6'5" and she's like 5'0", and they're chest to chest when they're standing. And I'm like, no, her eyes would be like his belly button. Like, so just sometimes kind of keeping that in mind too, like, or size differences could make certain positions just like outright impossible, right? And that could be something you can have fun with, like bringing in the humor thing. Like they could play around and be like, oh my gosh, that doesn't work. And it could be a fun thing, but it's just something like for me as a reader, for realism purposes, I definitely need some of that factored in.
For sure. Yeah, you make a good point. Like I have an aunt and an uncle that is the height difference you just described. And I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't work. It doesn't. It could never. What do we have? Rebecca, did you have anything to add? I know we haven't gotten to hear from you in a little bit.
Yeah, just I think something that helps me is like kind of like not acting out. Shouldn't really admit this. I think visualizing it as like a movie almost really helps me, because like I'm a really visual person, and if you're a visual person too, then recommend doing this. Just play out your scene as if it's happening like as a movie in your head, and that'll really help you find those moments of, oh well, if his legs up here and her arms down there, that's not going to work. I need to like rewrite that kind of thing. So yeah, just use that to really help you see the scene that you're writing, and you're probably going to pick up on some bits that aren't quite working out.
Yeah, lots of methods for this. This is great stuff, you guys. I think we covered everybody. So now to everybody's favorite question of the day. Are there any not sexy words that you have moved to your Hall of Shame shelf? What do you not want to talk about? What words do you not want to say?
Any word that you're going to find. Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, everybody go.
No loins. Talked about that. No loins. Don't give me that. That's my no.
Words from a science book. We don't want to hear the like anatomically correct words, please. Like no penis.
Testicles.
I don't want to hear penis.
Not sexy for you.
The C word, not okay by me.
Which one? There's a lot of them.
That's a good point.
Sorry.
See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Female anatomy.
See you next Tuesday.
Yes. See you is the yeah, that word. I don't really like that, especially descriptor. If a man especially is describing a woman and he says that word about it, it's kind of like, woo, I don't know.
Oh,
kind of gross and crass.
IPB. I liked it.
But I mean, everyone's taste is different. That's my personal, I don't know, because it speaks to me of someone who isn't respectful. When there's like, if someone is talking and using really crass words about the person they're about to have sex with, I'm like, unless she's into that and she said she's into that, it's not something that I think would work for me. But so I don't tend to use that. I also, I am so tired. I've read several fantasy books now. Oh.
He's over there struggling. The struggle is real.
Yeah, the struggle is real. Fantasy books where he describes his penis as a sword. You know, like please stop. It's not a sword.
It's not a sword. It's velvet wrapped steel. If you know, you know.
Oh, here we go. There we go. Those are the adjectives too. Those weird adjectives and adverbs and things. I don't like. Yeah. Quivering this and shivering that.
Oh, like a penis should never quiver.
Nope.
It's definitely preference.
Flower related when it comes to the vagina.
Petals.
Petals. Her unfolding petal. Like what the hell? Like so weird. Things like that really like it kind of takes you out of the moment when especially when we're reading romance novels, which most of the people reading romance novels are women. And so when we're hearing our anatomy being described in weird ways and compared to weird things, like one, I think sometimes it'll make you wonder, is there something wrong with my anatomy? Because I don't know that I have petals. So maybe I'm missing something. Also, fruit. When we're describing things tasting as fruit, I don't mind if there's like a hint because she had lotion or you brought something in, like she smelled like something. So you kind of, because, you know, taste and smell are connected. So you had like a hint of that, but to just be like, she tastes like cantaloupe is bizarre. She didn't, unless she's like some supernatural being. I don't think she's tastes like cantaloupe, but I could be wrong because I'm her, but I know I don't taste like cantaloupe.
Well, you're right. PNR. Like everybody smells like a candle factory. It's okay.
Well, and going along the food idea, like there was a short story I read where the guy was like, "It's Taco Tuesday," and I just went, "Oh God!"
Oh
no!
Oh,
yeah.
No!
You got a title wreck there?
No, please.
I would read Taco Tuesday.
Darla in the comments says meat curtains is always a no. Yeah.
No, why would you do that?
I read any kind of meat for any kind of anatomy is sausages, probably not a good idea.
Nope.
All the food reference. Yeah, the food stuff is kind of ridiculous. Although it can be funny depending on how it's used. Going back to the humor thing. They could say something like that and it could be very awkward and the other character can say, wait a minute, what did you just say? Or that kind of thing. But to do it seriously, and it is done seriously sometimes, I cannot believe people didn't read these things. And I don't want to be described as chocolate anything. Excuse me, just going into the diversity thing. No, I am not chocolate. I am not cinnamon. I am not whatever. They come up with these hot chocolate things. It's like, yeah, okay, right. No.
No.
There's that kind of stuff too that you have to be aware of. What are you doing with these words?
Yeah. Anybody got more no words?
Oh, in the comments, there's some pretty cringy stuff.
Yeah, baby batter.
Yeah.
Oh, quivering salami.
One of the things that we went through when I was going through the editing process for Out of His League was some of the heat levels in some of the words. So like the word pussy, the word cock, they can sometimes have incredible impact. And depending on the type of book and the situation, my editor said, let's tone that down a little bit. Let's bring some of those words out and replace them with something that's a little less in your face. And there's that to think about too. So I tend to use those words because you know what, when we talk dirty, those are the words that usually come out of our mouth because that's a cultural norm. And I leave them in. And unless my editor says, no, that's not a good word for there, let's take it out, they stand. But for sure, it's something to think about when we're editing is especially on Wattpad is using some of these words. We have to think about who's reading it and what they're going to get out of it. And if we're using some words that are a little less cultural, not as culturally appropriate or as culturally normative, we need to think about that as well. So just a serious point on the conversation.
And I do think that changes, Caroline, when it comes to how you're publishing, because I think we see a lot more books now hitting Barnes and Noble that are self-published books.
Yep.
And these words are a-okay for the self-published book, whereas when you're with you're being traditionally published, you will have our editor we need to keep this librarian friendly was the words that were used with us. So
we had to librarian friendly. Yeah, we had to take out.
I heard if I don't hear the word keep it for the librarians, I got a lot of that.
We did too. We had to take out finger licking. We had to keep it.
It made us sad.
Made us real sad. We took out the P's and C's as we called them for Spellbound, but Beautiful Chaos has a lot of those P's and C's. So we've kind of we've gone a little bit more explicit as we write more, but our Spellbound doesn't have, I don't think, any of those. But our newer stuff does. So I
don't know. I feel like when people try and avoid the harsher words, it can sometimes draw more attention to it. Like if someone's describing it as like a hardened member, it really just brings me. I'm like, oh, that word's used. Whereas if they just use like the C word, I'd be like, yeah, okay, breeze right past that. So I don't know. I feel like it might draw more attention to it if someone's trying to beat around the bush. Yeah.
The bush.
The bush.
I was like,
Make it weird.
And I think that lets the readers play looking at the trends and what's trending right now in romance. And a great place to do that, there's two places. One is Book Talk and the other is on Bookstagram, and looking at what people are reading and how steamy, because now we see as people are going and they're rating their books, they're putting the chili peppers up there, right?
Yep.
How many chili peppers? So really the spicy is really, it's important to a lot of romance readers, especially. So looking at that and what spicy is too spicy, like take a moment, look at comments, see if somebody was like, that book was just a little too spicy for me. And how many people really felt it was too spicy, or going on Goodreads and looking at the comments under them. I think you get a good gauge for what readers are looking at and whether we need to move into that. And I think when you're on Wattpad, we kind of set the way. You start seeing that spicy stuff has been really spicy stuff has been pretty popular on Wattpad for a while. And now we're seeing it move out into Bookstagram and TikTok. And for about the last 2 years, that has been the norm in those places. So, just kind of looking at how all that stuff is moving, will let you know whether that's something the readers really want to consume.
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to so much preference that you're just going to have to write your chosen selection of words, and the right audience will vibe with it or they won't. So
True.
Yeah, you do what feels right for you.
Yep.
We've got just a minute for last thoughts, and then I gotta get us out of here. We had a good time.
Oh,
Good.
That's good.
Any last no words?
No.
I think you got them all.
Fine. All right, so be it. Okay, guys, it's been a lot of fun. The next panel for WritersConnX is going to be on September 10th. So join us again for that one. More info coming soon. Again, I had bios that I unfortunately didn't load for me in time. So again, I definitely recommend you guys checking out Rebecca, Avery, Crystal, Felicity, Caroline, Cynthia, and me if you want to. But these are the panelists over here. And everybody here has a lot of really cool works on and off Wattpad. There's a mix, so go check them out. Thanks for joining us.